On today's Locked On Bucks, the Bucks are headed back to Las Vegas. Can we call it an impressive win against the shorthanded Orlando Magic? We dive into what we saw, including a big night from Khris Middleton, coming up next here on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined by Frank Madden, and we thank you for not only making Locked On Bucks your first listen of the day, but subscribing to the Locked On Bucks newsletter as well. If you have not yet, sign up for free at LockedOnDaily.com. That is LockedOnDaily.com. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LockedOnNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Frank, as mentioned in the open there, the Bucks are headed to Las Vegas for the second consecutive year. I believe they're the only team that can say they're doing so. They beat the Orlando Magic, and coming in, I think everybody that may not have known much about the Magic knew, I know their defense is good. I know they got a lot of injuries, so the offense may be in question. So in some ways, you could look at this and say, hey, the defense was okay for the Bucks, but who was really out there for the Magic? I choose to be more optimistic and say, look, the Magic hit tough shots. I think the Bucks' transition defense was excellent tonight. And overall, you're just continuing to see more of a movement in the right direction on both ends.
I've been beating the drum of it's just about wins right now, get above 500, and certainly doubly true in the cup where, you win and you're out, right? So, sure, I want to win an NBA Cup. I want to see the Bucks be NBA Cup champions. I want to see Darvin Ham and Taurean Prince continue their undefeated careers in the NBA Cup. That said, I have to say, this game was exhausting. Like the entire game. And a lot of it was because coming in, you knew that no Paolo Banchero, no Franz Wagner. Offensively, obviously, the Magic, over the past year have been a pretty bad offensive team. Even when those guys have been healthy, They have made their living on the defensive end. And realistically, what they had tonight, especially Jalen Suggs hurting his hand then at one point, there's no way they should have had the firepower to, ultimately compete in this game. So it was a frustrating game because on the one hand, the upside, Giannis doing Giannis stuff again, 37 points, 5 blocks. That defense was huge, rim protecting, multiple chase down blocks. Dame Lillard, massive close to the game. He really picked his spots, in the first 40 minutes or so of the game. But when they needed to make plays, we saw it in Boston, big time, kind of fizzle from the offense down the stretch. Not just Dame, but Giannis as well in that game. Different story tonight with Dame hitting that massive three, getting to the rim for, I'm going to call it a dunk, Justin, that put them ahead, and then, made free throws all night. His playmaking, especially in the pick and roll in the first 2-3 quarters was great. So on the one hand, you had kind of Dame and Giannis doing kind of peak Dame and Giannis stuff. We'll talk about Khris. One of Chris's weirdest games, probably, I don't know if I've ever seen him not score a point and look like he was controlling the game with his passing. Took 2 shots, 8 assists, 3 steals, just a weird game from him as he works his way back. But, the exhaustion came from the turnovers. It feels like every other game or, at least once a week, they have just these games where they just get so careless with turnovers, sloppy with the ball. And, it just comes back to this idea of you're just, your margin for error is just so reduced when you just don't get to have as many shots as the other team. And the other piece was fouls. Just some of the fouls, especially on Jalen Suggs, like living at the foul line, AJ Green just randomly hitting him in the head, like 25 feet from the basket. The last, 5 seconds of this game where they're up 5 and Gary Trent fouls Jet Howard on a 3-point attempt. It's just like, guys, it shouldn't be this hard. Okay. The fouling, and then lastly, defensive rebounding again. It's weird. I feel like for them, as many times as I've complained about defensive rebounding this season, they've had a lot of games where it's been an issue, but then every other game they're good. So it's like been weird. Like they're still a little bit above average defensive rebounding, but it just felt like that was another thorn in their side, and really gave the Magic a lot of extra opportunities for them to stay in it in a game where they were, really short on offensive firepower. But again, job one is win. Bucks did that. They closed well. When Giannis was in the game, I felt supremely confident. And man, Bobby Portis as well. I haven't mentioned Bobby. We'll talk about him, but for him to nearly replicate offensively his performance from Sunday in Brooklyn, nearly go perfect again in this game where obviously they needed scoring and they were very frustrating on that end for long stretches. He deserves another tip of the cap. So a lot of positives, some kind of familiar sources of frustration, but at the end of the day, hey, they're 13-11. They're going to Vegas and see what they can do from here.
Yeah, I thought what you touched on there with the confidence when Giannis was on the floor. He missed, I think, his first 3 shots of the game, and they were all at the rim. But then after that, there was just no answer for him. They were dominating the Giannis minutes early in the first half, and you looked around and you said, okay, somebody else has to start to hit shots though. Like this can't be a redo of what game was that earlier this year where Giannis just did everything offensively. And that's when Bobby Portis really came in and gave that offense a boost. As you mentioned, nearly identical to what we saw against the Brooklyn Nets over the weekend too. So I thought his minutes were huge, but the guy that we do have to talk about quite a bit for what he gave is someone you just mentioned moments ago in Khris Middleton. In one of the more strange Khris Middleton games where I agree with you, he did not score. He only took 2 shots. And yet you could make a strong case that as good as Bobby Portis was, as good as Dame was down the stretch, Khris Middleton might have been the second best player start to finish in this game tonight for the Bucks for everything that he did for this offense. So we will get into that conversation, including some very interesting assists numbers for Khris Middleton coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is sponsored by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Time to talk to you now about Mint Mobile with big wireless providers. What you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overage. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month, and they all come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That is mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. So Khris Middleton, the other player that I thought really stood out here, Frank, he had 8 assists in the game. As you mentioned, did not score, only took 2 field goals. It just felt like he was in control all night. And of those 8 assists, how many would you venture were to Giannis?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, it's just crazy, and it felt like I'd be curious to see what the overlap was between Giannis and Khris minutes, because it felt like Doc was really trying to make sure that the two of them were overlapping their minutes. And it's just remarkable how, the threat of Chris's scoring and just his patience and the way he probes and manipulates, defenses and runs pick and rolls. Just it's just surgical how he's able to, work with Giannis, and just the chemistry and understanding the two of those guys have together, that, they can run, set plays as well as anybody. But then to me, like, the magic is in, no pun intended, the magic is in just the improvised stuff, right? And just the two of them just being able to kind of exchange a glance, and for Khris to just know that Giannis is going to roll to the rim. He's going to find seams around the basket, and Khris is just always going to look at him. And occasionally, occasionally Khris will have, bad turnovers, right? Like, maybe got a little ambitious in that Boston game, cut through a couple that were maybe a little rusty. But when, most of the time he's connecting, and it's just easy money. I'd be curious how many dunks Giannis had tonight. He must have had 7, 8 dunks. Not like he was dunking the ball like every other shot. He'd hit 15 field goals, and it felt like probably at least half of them were dunks. It was pretty crazy. And it was great to see Dame also finding Giannis for kind of an improvised little, when he could have taken a short floater, saw Giannis wide open, throw it up. Giannis dunks it with one hand at the end of the first quarter. And so, just everybody, whether you're one of the, kind of shooting guards, whether you're Andre Jackson, whether you're Dame, everybody just watch how Khris does this. Watch how Khris looks for Giannis. And, with Giannis, you can tell, like, Giannis knows when to cut those, like, delayed cuts when Khris has the ball. Obviously the pick and rolls, are just money with the two of them. But it's just such a pleasure to watch. And it's, nothing is surprising. Like, we're just saying the same stuff we've said forever, but it just needs to be said. Like, Chris's passing is just, on another level. I've said for years he was the best passer on the team. Giannis is a very different type of passer, right? Giannis is like a movement, throw to a spot type passer. He's incredible at that. But Khris, as just like a touch passer, right? Just being able to know how to weight passes. He does it well with Brook as well, but especially with Giannis, just knowing what he's able to do, that catch radius. It's just remarkable how many baskets, easy buckets he creates for Giannis. And so, it doesn't matter, if on a night like this, it didn't really matter if Khris got any shots off. And, again, it's just that pacing. He makes even a Magic team that has obviously good defenders. Khris just knows how to manipulate defenses. He knows how to make everybody play at his speed. And, it's just that wavelength that he and Giannis are on is just a sight to watch. And obviously tonight they needed that, because it was one of these weird games where it felt like the Bucks had a lot of turnovers. They did a lot of things poorly, but it felt like when they when they didn't turn the ball over, it felt like they were able to get really good shots, especially out of the pick and roll. And that was probably the most frustrating part of this game being close, was it felt like, man, the other guys don't really have any firepower, and it feels like you guys can get great shots whenever you want them. And yet here we are, kind of going down to the last minute. But again, kudos. They scored when they needed to. Giannis hit his clutch free throws when he needed to, and punch that ticket to Vegas.
It was 8 dunks that Giannis had in this game, just 8. And 7 of the 8 assists from Khris Middleton went to Giannis. It wasn't quite there in terms of the chemistry, like riding a bike the first 2 games, but it was certainly there tonight with his just ability, as you mentioned, to find him on some of those slip screens, and Giannis knows just when it's coming. And again, mentioning how good he is at manipulating, and especially when he gets guys that are smaller than him, where he can just go to work. I think what encapsulated that and stood out the most was there was a sequence in, I think it was late in the fourth quarter, where Khris, I forget who was matched up on him, but he was around the basket. And of all people, to forget where Giannis is around the rim, but Khris just in the post, working his way down near the basket, didn't have anything, and then here comes Giannis, and Khris just does the wraparound pass to him. It's the stuff like that that's been missing, and your point about his passing, we saw last year, for all intents and purposes, he was their backup point guard, and I don't know, I don't remember if DeLon Wright did get in the game against the Celtics. If he did, he didn't play much. DeLon Wright hasn't played in the last 2 games with Khris Middleton back. So I think when Doc Rivers talked about versatility and wanting to do things differently, I think people heard, well, we can't do it yet because Khris isn't here. And they rolled their eyes like, whoa, when can you rely on Khris? When is he going to be there? And that's just an excuse. But I think it's stuff like this where you can see some of the different lineups that they can go to offensively and defensively. Khris Middleton playing as your backup point guard, the stuff like that they just couldn't do, and how much of that hinges on having Khris Middleton.
Yeah, and I think that was the question I know some folks were, pinging me about on Twitter. What's the kind of minutes impact of Khris coming back? And I think there are a couple obvious things. One is like, well, for one, Taurean Prince obviously is not going to keep playing 28 minutes per game or whatever he was.
30 or more times. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, look, even if he keeps starting, Khris is going to eat into that, right? They're the ones sharing that small forward spot for the most part. But there are kind of knock-on effects that I think you can see up and down the roster, right? Just because, we haven't seen the Bucks necessarily go with a lot of small ball lineups yet. I think that's one thing that, I hope
we saw it for 10 seconds tonight when they closed the game with guys on the perimeter and Giannis.
Yeah. Bobby Portis has basically like annulled the need for that true small ball group the last 2 games because he's just shot the piss out of the ball. 18 of 21 shooting over the last 2 games and has deservedly closed. I don't really resent, again, like we can debate whether Bobby should be trade fodder or not, but if he's hitting shots and contributing, there's only upside, whether you want to trade Bobby Portis or whether you want to keep Bobby Portis. There's nothing but good kind of, knock-on effect of Bobby making shots and contributing. But I think some people were hoping that, okay, maybe you can phase Bobby's minutes down if Khris is coming back, playing more small ball 4. I think DeLon obviously, was another guy that I wasn't sure if he just wasn't going to play at all. But certainly the role of just guy to dribble the ball up or, initiate offense with the second unit. Obviously Khris is way better at that than DeLon Wright, which isn't surprising, right? Like nobody expects DeLon Wright to be better than Khris Middleton offensively. But look where we are right now. This is a healthy version of the Bucks, right? There's no Pat Connaughton, there's no DeLon Wright. And you're seeing, essentially the starting 5 that we saw before Khris returned, at least for now, right? With Khris sort of still in his minutes limit range of 20-25. And then it's, that kind of continued starting 5. And then obviously resurgent Bobby Portis, Khris, AJ Green, and who am I forgetting?
Gary Trent.
And Gary Trent. And I think I don't think we can really complain about that. Again, Bobby certainly has made the case why he obviously needs to continue playing. It's like the idea that he's just not going to play at all, obviously, was never realistic. So as long as he's here, he's going to play. I think the question is, are there going to be nights where he plays a lot less because he's not playing well and you've got the ability to go smaller more often? That's what I kind of hope for, is that Doc can kind of ride the hot hand when he's got it, like tonight and Sunday, and then you can go a different direction, if he's not playing well. But we'll see. So I think Doc is playing the guys who should be playing.
Yeah.
And I look, as much as I'm a Brook fan, he really hasn't been very impactful these last 2 games, and he hasn't closed.
Yeah. No
complaint. I think that's fine. And honestly, lowering the burden on Brook, I think probably isn't a bad thing anyway, because really going back to the last Bud year, right? Like his minutes have been much higher these last 2+ seasons now than probably he would have wanted, right? He kind of was in like mid to high 20s there for a while. and then his burden, which part of it is just a reflection of him playing super well, and being so pivotal to what the Bucks are trying to do defensively. But on tonight it felt kind of similar to Sunday, where it just felt like he wasn't really getting a measure. Like he just wasn't impacting at the rim as much as we're used to seeing. It seemed like the Magic kind of, knew how to attack him. And yeah, I think Doc made good decisions, and ultimately they were able to do just enough. And okay, we can, it's nice to be able to complain about kind of what the Bucks can do better on nights when they actually win basketball games.
Yeah,
I don't want to just ignore it, but especially given a lot of it is kind of a recurring theme. And again, it's frustrating. At 13-11, look, we know they obviously had to dig themselves out of that big hole to start the year, and it's been kind of a different story since then. But that said, I mean, a lot of the stuff we were complaining about a year ago during Adrian Griffin's time, right? Then it was more about, hey, they're just a great offense, just doing enough to outscore teams. This year it's been more balanced, right? I think we're still starting to see the offense, especially the shoot.
Yeah, I think they're 10th now offensively. But like, I think we would agree here. The defense, I think what they're doing in terms of like the metrics is sustainable. We didn't even talk about, they were really good in transition defense tonight. And again, it's, the Magic don't have a lot of great finishers in that sense, but the Magic weren't adding points in transition. Giannis had a couple of chase downs. Damian Lillard, he's done this a couple of times this year.
Yeah.
Where he'll turn the ball over, but he gets back on defense. And even if he doesn't get a steal, he at least prevents a layup there. So they did
really have that knock away too after which is kind of
and that to me is what kind of backs up the I do believe what I'm seeing defensively here, that it's not just going to be like what we saw when Doc took over a year ago, and it's, hey, look what their defense is doing, and then it fell off a cliff because of things like that, and because of the fact that the transition opportunities is still very high with this team. But since November, I think they're right around like 14th or 15th in efficiency defensively there, which, hey, if you're going to tell me we know we're going to give up a lot of those opportunities, but we're going to get back and defend it, I can live with that because their half-court defense has been pretty good this year. So I do think what we're seeing is real, that they could and should finish somewhere anywhere between like 11th through 14th or 15th defensively, but the offense has to be like a top 5 offense. It's not there yet, but I think we've seen enough signs to believe it could be coming pretty soon.
I think probably the idealized version of this team is, I think the absolute peak of what you could probably get from this team defensively based on kind of what we've seen and everything is, could you sneak into the top 10? I think that's possible.
Maybe, yeah.
Even if you had like shooting luck, right? Like they haven't had, they had better opponent 3-point percentage luck the last couple seasons before this one. Not that they're getting really bad, really unlucky this year or something like that. I mean, again, like the Magic shot really poorly tonight. We've seen some games like that recently. But yeah, I mean, if they got a little bit more luck, could they potentially sneak in as a top 10 defensive team? I think that's possible, especially if they leaned more into Andre Jackson, right? That's the most obvious offense-defense trade-off that right now I think they're still trying to figure out how consistently they can play him in order to defend at a high level without costing them too much offensively. I think as we've discussed it, if you're kind of leaning towards like Khris, Giannis as a pairing that's getting a lot of run together outside of the starting group, then I would ask that question. Can you get Andre more minutes playing with Dame or Dame and Khris if Dame and Khris are out there without Giannis? But basically stagger them so that you're getting a lot of Andre when Giannis is off the floor, and that way, he doesn't enable them to zone up Giannis in particular, right? Because I think everybody else, you're playing. Otherwise, you're playing a lot of 5 out or trying to play a lot of 5 out when Giannis isn't on the floor. And in that scenario, I think Andre, being like a dribble handoff, like setting high screens thing, right? Because especially if they're going to put their worst defender on Andre, which, is the obvious thing to do. Well, how do you engage that defender? Have him set screens, have him get near the ball. And if you can do that without having to give him the ball, obviously that's even better. So, And he had that one nice little duck under move tonight. So
Yeah.
shout out to him for that.
Yeah.
Obviously didn't play a ton, but had another moment, which again, it's like with Andre, even just getting like, hey, just once or twice a game, just show
attack.
that you're a threat. Right? Show that you can be aggressive, looking for your shot. Came in tonight at 37%, which is from three, which is exactly what he was at last year too, which is just funny that that's like the most consistent thing about his offensive game is that he hits threes at a pretty good rate. So, but yeah, I think that to me that ability to get Andre meaningful minutes as the season wears on, figuring out ways to maybe not weaponize him offensively, but just minimize any harm that he does.
Yeah.
To me, that's one of those kind of big swing questions because if you end up playing other guys a lot more than him, I think it will cost you on the defense, right? It is interesting. I mean, I think Andre moves his feet so well. He navigates. He's gotten so good at navigating screens, getting skinny. Like Drew was so good at getting skinny and just kind of sidestepping past screens so he doesn't even get touched. And then you watch. AJ is obviously not as just flat out quick, but moves his feet well. But it feels like AJ's fouled a lot lately.
Yeah, yes.
I actually looked to see if AJ had a higher foul rate. I was like, wouldn't it be crazy if AJ had a higher foul? He's fouled out twice, I think, this year.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Rate, or if he had a higher foul rate per minute than Andre. He does not, by the way. I just double checked. AJ's at 3.4, came into tonight, 3.4 per 36, which is high for a wing. And Andre, can you guess what Andre's at?
AJ was 3.4 per 36, so Andre 4.2.
5.1. Still one of the higher rates. I'm actually just let me just double check here to see what he was at last year. I know it was higher last year. But again, it's like, well, how do you play Andre more minutes? I mean, not like basically fouling out per 36 would be, a good
start.
A good place to start. He was at 5.8 fouls per 36 last year. So he's gotten better, but still room for improvement. But anyway.
Yeah.
Have we hit on everybody? We've talked about Khris. We talked a bit about Bobby. I feel like Giannis, we always just sort of take for granted. We talk a little bit about Giannis and Dame. But I don't know, anything else you wanted to hit on specifically as far as individual contributions?
I think in terms of individuals, that's probably it. So we'll take one more break here, and I suppose preview who we think it's going to be Saturday for the Bucks in the semifinals. Once again, either the Knicks or the Atlanta Hawks. Will get into that next here on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. You've heard Camille and I both talk about our ticket purchasing experience with Game Time. Take all the guesswork out of it. The easiest ticket purchasing app out there on the market, especially if maybe it's the time of year where you're taking in some new stadiums or arenas. You want to see what your seat is going to look like. If it's a place you've never been to before, you can get a panoramic view from your seat with Game Time picks. Toggle on the all-in pricing feature, and you can see the ticket cost up front with no sticker shock and surprise fees once you get to checkout. And this comes with the lowest price guaranteed, where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find those seats cheaper elsewhere. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So, yes, and just to put a bow on the individual performances, I mean, Giannis was great again with 37. Dame, another one of those games I feel like we talked about quite a bit where, maybe it wasn't quite there all the way for Dame. 8 of 15 from the floor, not a terrible shooting night. 2 of 5 on threes. But you just look up and, I mean, granted, a part of it was, I think 9 of the last 11 points he scored to close out the game.
11
those bursts. 11 to 13, even better. So those bursts. And again, like having Damian Lillard and Khris Middleton on the floor in a game where, okay, it's going to come down to free throws and just opening things up there too, where it's Giannis, you inbound. As long as we get it to one of these two guys, we feel like it's over.
Yeah, I felt like the announcer jinx watching this game on TNT. Sam Van Gundy was talking way too much about Damian Lillard never missing free throws.
Yeah.
To be principal on those last couple. Yeah, I mean, it is a luxury having, obviously we get the double-edged sword of we have Giannis and we get everything else, but the free throw stuff.
And in that close of game situation, you talked about the foul that Gary Trent had, but there was 5 seconds left. I think it was 5.1 when Giannis was at the line. I can't believe I'm saying this, but at one point before that second free throw, you looked at the clock and timeout situation and thought, well, it's already a 2-possession game. They'd be better off if he missed this free throw to take some time for the rebound and maybe even get it. And Orlando burns their timeout, and then they're inbounding the front court out of timeouts with even less time and needing 2 possessions to win this game.
Thanks, Jason Kidd.
Well, he was guarding against the 5-point play.
Let me check. Let me confirm. Let's just look at this real quick. So Giannis, when did Giannis shoot his free throws? Giannis shot his free throws. You were correct with 5 seconds left. Bucks were up 3. So yes, he hits his first one to go up 4 and the second one to go up 5. I mean, I'm glad he didn't do that because Jet Howard getting to the line for the 3 free throws, he missed his third one intentionally and didn't hit rim, so it was irrelevant. But if he had done a better job of missing that free throw, I mean, if Giannis had, again, coulda, woulda, shoulda. If Giannis had missed a shot, again, you could say they didn't have any time. I think because they didn't have any time.
Then 2 ties. They didn't have any timeouts. Yeah.
Oh, they did have a timeout after Giannis.
The Bucks did. Yeah.
The Magic took a full timeout after Giannis hit his second.
The one. So my point was, well, if he misses, maybe you could run a second off of the tussling for the rebound, maybe even more. They use their timeout, then they're out of timeouts, have to get a shot, and with the time that's coming off the clock, that may be it. But hey, at least we didn't have to find out.
Yeah, and then finally we got Dame Lillard at the line, up 3 with 2 free throws. Felt pretty good about Dame hitting all these players.
Well, and especially since the original sequence was Bobby Portis, we thought, going to the line at 10 seconds. And I think it was a 2-point game then, where you were like, okay, he's a good free throw shooter, but man, I'd really rather have Dame or Khris Middleton at the line right now.
Yeah, they were up 3, I believe. I'm just looking at it. Oh no, you're right. They were only up 1 when that happened. So then they end up getting Dame. Bucks retain possession, which thank God. And then Dame hit 2 free throws. Yeah. So again, too much drama. Too close for comfort there late. But took care of business. And I think the other thing too is, yes, this is a tournament game, but it counts as a regular season game.
Yeah.
And importantly, the Magic are, one of your clear rivals for a top 4 seed in the East. So to win this game while giving the Magic a loss, obviously you pick up a full game in the standings on them. That ain't nothing. And depending on what happens here in this Hawks-Knicks game tomorrow or today, depending on when people listen to this, you're going to have a chance to potentially
do the same.
Give the Knicks lose to the Hawks and you pick up, a game in the loss column through that, or you have a chance to go against the Knicks and, do the same thing again in terms of picking up a valuable game in the standings against a Knicks team that obviously beat the crap out of. I mean, I'm trying to think, I guess the Hawks game was also a pretty poor game. I'm going to say, like, in the last month, like, how many bad games have the Bucks played is basically probably that Knicks game. That's the Hawks game.
The Hawks, and like the Hawks is at least understandable. Like
back to
coming back on a back-to-back, and it was 4 games in 7 days, and Hawks were playing well. You were on this win streak. You just had the sense of, I think they're losing this game. The Knicks was the
I
last
told
time.
everybody that you predicted it, Justin. I said Neil's pod with her. I said Justin came on last night, so they're losing this game. I didn't want to believe it, but he was right.
And I thought they were going to lose by double digits too. So that's what we got. And in this next game, whichever team it is, to your point, if the Hawks win, you gain a game in the loss column of the Knicks, and then the Hawks would be right there with you again. So if you play them on Saturday, you could knock them off too. That all these games are coming against teams that are right there around you in the standings. So to your larger point of these are still regular season games, that's the important part, and a part of I think what makes this even more interesting is a pretty lazy word to use, but interesting with what we're doing with the NBA Cup here, that it's regular season games that we're talking about. It looks like the Thunder have won. I think it's final. So the Thunder win in advance. So tomorrow we have the Knicks hosting the Hawks and the Rockets hosting the Warriors to figure out who the final four are in the semifinals to be played Saturday. The last thing I would say too, Frank, is we would obviously, like for Darvin Ham and Taurean Prince to remain unbeaten in NBA Cup play. If the Bucks do lose, I know it's a regular season game, but if they do lose on Saturday, it's also not the worst thing in the sense that you have off until the following Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize that there was such a huge break. So is the championship, is that on Monday or Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Yeah. No rest for the weary. Let's.
I mean, look, if you win, you still get 2 days off in between games. So
okay, fine. I'll take the win. But yeah, I mean, appreciate these chances to win something, right? I think that's sort of been the motto the Bucks have had. It's like if there's a championship to win in front of you, go try to win it. If they can do it, it'll be fun. If they don't, you move on. But as you said, I mean, again, these are also just regular season games. So I think that I view the cup piece as kind of gravy. And hopefully this year, regardless of who they play on Saturday, hopefully it'll be a better result, obviously, than last year. And the irony is, the Pacers kind of went into that cup game already feeling like the Pacers kind of maybe had something on the Bucks last year. They give them the business in that game in Vegas. This year, you're playing either the Knicks or the Hawks, the two teams that have basically given you the business here in the last month. So hopefully they will have learned something from that prior game against either of those teams, and they'll be able to come out with a better effort, come out and show that they can actually beat a good team, which unfortunately, this game is technically this game or maybe the Rockets game, like technically they're
two best wins
in terms of opponent winning percentage. Obviously, some asterisks apply in this game given the injuries, but beggars cannot be choosers. I will happily accept a win against a 500 above 500 team in this depleted version of the Magic, and whatever is needed to win one more on Saturday, I'll accept that as well.
Saturday, either the Hawks or the Knicks in the semifinals of the NBA Cup. And the last piece of irony too, we had I think a lot of people questioned coming into the season, man, are the Pacers, are they really just the 21 Hawks with what they did? And now with what the Hawks are doing this year too, like, hey, are the Hawks last year's Pacers with what they're doing? So it all just comes full circle here for the Bucks. But we'll find out later on tomorrow night, tonight, whenever it is you listen to this, of who the Bucks are going to play, either the Knicks or the Atlanta Hawks.
By the way, Justin, shout out. I haven't mentioned this, but I feel like the Bucks zone has been a useful weapon these last.
It has, and Doc Rivers talked about that a little bit tonight, and even said, if you notice, and we run it in the third quarter because I don't want to run it in the first half and give opponents the chance to react to it. And okay, what are we going to do differently against this?
I was going to say I run in the third quarter because we inevitably have a third quarter swoon and we need something to get us out of that funk. But yeah,
that too maybe.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's generally been kind of they've started to get, I think, a little bit more comfortable running it. Yeah. And again, it's not necessarily something you want to do for 12 minutes straight, but it is, I think, a useful tool just to give teams, especially when they start to get to a little bit of comfort zone, to throw teams a little bit of a curveball, make them have to react and attack a little bit differently. So, yeah, kudos to Doc and company for getting a bit more comfortable with that zone, and hopefully it will continue to be an effective weapon for them and a little bit of a change of pace option.
Well, Saturday, the next game for the Bucks, either the Knicks or the Atlanta Hawks in the semifinals of the NBA Cup, and we'll see if this year the Bucks can reach the finals. That'll do it for today's show. For Frank, I'm Justin. We will talk to you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.